You're watching Global Toronto. This is Global News at 5:30.
Well, continuing down at Queen's Park, Premier Doug Ford and his government introduced legislation to force an end to the strike at York University. That legislation, however, not sitting well with the union representing workers. Jamie Morocker has that story for you tonight.
Exhausted and frustrated, these picketers are just a few of the close to 2,000 temporary and casual York University employees entering week 20 of a strike.
It's been very difficult on us, on our families. It's been horrifying financially. It's been appalling.
And with no agreement or further negotiation in sight, the province has decided it will step in, tabling back to work legislation in hopes to get students back to class by September. A move the Civil Liberties Association says
will be unconstitutional.
Earlier this summer, Premier Doug Ford had announced he would champion a fair negotiation between the university and its workers, a process that will now be skipped over.
I've certainly never seen that before, where a new government comes in and instantly brings in back to work legislation.
But CUPE 3903 Chairman Devin Lefebvre says he isn't surprised.
We did have a brief 15-minute phone call with the new Minister for Training Colleges and Universities, where there was not much that was discussed in terms of what the government planned to do moving things forward.
This isn't the first time CUPE 3903 members faced being forced back to class. Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals had announced a similar plan pre-election.
We've seen different types of governments put in back to work legislation. I think the solution at the end of the day is going to the roots of the problem, which is chronic underfunding.
Back on campus as the strike enters its 134th day, these picketers say they aren't backing down until they see that solution.
We're hoping to show the new government that you can't trample on labor rights in this province.
CUPE 3903 prepared to take their fight all the way to court. Jamie Morocker, Global News.
This is CBC Toronto News.
Back to work legislation to end the York University strike. We are now 133 days into this strike with no end in sight. Part of this bill addresses this and would introduce back to work legislation for those people who have been on strike for all these months.
Now, we understand there's been a reaction to that part of the bill ending the strike. What are we hearing from the union representing those workers now?
Well, Dwight, before this piece of legislation was even introduced this afternoon, this morning a group gathered here at Queen's Park, CUPE amongst others, to protest this. Keep in mind, this is no surprise. Doug Ford campaigned on this promise to introduce back-to-work legislation to get these people on strike at York University back to work. But what the group asked him today was to allow them to maintain this right to bargain, to allow them to come to a deal with the university without any intervention, and effectively for the government not to introduce any back-to-work legislation.
Stripping our rights to meaningful collective bargaining and our right to strike is not the answer. Back-to-work legislation will poison labor relations at York University for the foreseeable future and put a chill on collective bargaining across this province, as it eliminates any incentive for employers to negotiate with unions.
So this bill, which includes all these three things, Dwight, it was just introduced today. It still has to be debated and then go through several readings, but certainly it gives us a footprint of what we can expect to be hearing about in the coming days here at Queen's Park.
Farah, thank you.
The province has also tabled back-to-work legislation to end the York University strike, a move that could spark a court battle.
Certainly, if this is the first step that this government is taking, it does not bode well.
I bet you there's a lot of parents who are wondering whether or not they'll send their kids to York in the future.
The union representing workers says the legislation introduced without exploring a negotiated settlement is a violation of their rights, and it will be up to its members to decide whether to fight the legislation in court. A new school year is 7 weeks away.